In metaphysics, we have a subcategory of things called ontology. This is the chief part of metaphysics, studies the kinds of things that exist. We believe, at least in the West, that there are two kinds of things that exist. We believe that there are material objects, and this is the hard part. We also believe that there are immaterial. Normally when you say immaterial, that means it doesn't matter. But when we say immaterial, we mean non-material. Now, how do we break that down? Material objects are spatial, public, and mechanical. Everybody can see this, takes up space, and it follows the laws of physics. Eventually, this will degrade. Chairs take up space, they're mechanistic, they behave according to the laws of physics, therefore, they're non-intentional. This table can't move itself. It has to be moved. They do not behave according to purpose. They're not teleological. Immaterial or non-material are non-spatial. In other words, they don't take up space. They're private, your thoughts, your intuitions, your ideas, concepts. They're teleological, governed by goals and purposes. You think for a reason. Why did you wear clothes today? What am I going to eat? How am I going to get an A in this class? Everything we do when it comes to the thought or the non-material process or the immaterial process is teleological. We assume that we are motivating ideas, concepts, thoughts, intuitions, and epiphany. We assume that we are initiating those. Ideas take up no space. I move into a room because I want to. My body takes up space, but I am there intentionally. So even though I'm in my body, this creates what we call mind-body dualism. I have a mind, I have a consciousness, I have a will, and somehow these interact with one another. My body doesn't walk into the room without my consent. I move my body. The philosophical question is, what's the connection between my mind and my body? Am I really the prime mover of my body, or is there something else that's going on? And we used to think this for a long time. Eventually, we'll get to intentionality in here, whether or not you have free will. Did I mention the experiment they did in France in here? They took people and they hooked them up to encephalographs. We know certain parts of the brain do certain. They hooked them up and they sat them down. And they said, as soon as one of you realizes you're hungry, raise your hand and say, I'm hungry. Or if you're thirsty, raise your hand and say, you're thirsty. And they literally did this. Someone said, I'm thirsty or I'm hungry. And what they did is on the machines that were hooked up to the brain waves, they realized that just before someone said, I'm hungry or thirsty, their brains took off and their brains were sending a message to them that they were either hungry or thirsty. And then their consciousness picked up on that signal and they realized, I'm hungry. I realized I'm thirsty. That threw the whole mind-body problem into it too, because we assume that we're deciding to do certain things and that the body is obeying us, and yet this seemed to turn the table on that and say maybe the body is what directs us. And so we're in a symbiotic relationship where the consciousness of a person goes along with certain inputs. Gives rise to a union between these two. Maybe the empiricists have it right. We perceive certain things and respond to them, but there is an intellect that's involved in it. Have I confused anybody yet? Cody, go ahead.
So, in the case of like Michael J. Fox or Muhammad Ali, where they have no control over their body.
Say again now?
Like Michael J. Fox or Muhammad Ali, they had no control over their body. You know, he still doesn't have control over his body. He just does what he wants on his own.
And what does that give us? That's correct. The exceptions to the rule, and how does that work in the grand scheme of how we understand things? Absolutely right. It's a great example. How does that work? And frankly, we don't know.
And yet, going back to, you know, if a tree falls in the woods and someone can hear it, that another exception to the rule would be, what about a deaf person?
What about a deaf person?
They can hear.
Sure. That doesn't change necessarily the physics of the tree, but the reception of whether or not it makes a sound or not. Absolutely. How does a mother at 3:12 in the morning know that her child is just wounded in combat half a world away? And the telegram telling her that that child has been wounded doesn't come till the next day, and it turns out it says, your time, 3 to 3:12, maybe 8 hours or 10 hours ahead, and they're both exactly, how did she know that? You know, I believe there's another dimension, that thoughts can travel in other dimensions. We hear voices, and everyone says, well, there's no one there. That doesn't mean you didn't hear a voice. We're just not tuned into that dimension necessarily. We see shadows. Doesn't mean they're not real. We're just not tuned in. Maybe that's the seventh dimension. We don't know. We haven't spent enough time in it because we're in this four-dimensional world that we're hardwired into. But there may be other examples that explain some things that we can't explain. So Plato says this, Basically, in metaphysics, there's 5 areas we need to know about things that are real. There are things that are material. Matter is the only true material. If you believe matter is the only true material, you believe in materialism. Materialism means only matter is real. This is not a reference to physical science, which studies matter and physical things. To claim that only physical things are real is a metaphysical claim. It's a claim about the whole of reality. There are some people who only believe that the world is made up of matter. Other people believe that the world is only made up of ideas, and we call them idealists or idealism. Ideas, thoughts, concepts, and minds are the ultimate reality. Now, when we get to Eastern philosophy and we get to Hinduism, you will see a very strange concept of how they understand matter. Matter for them is not as real as the ideal world. If you take away and you begin to take away all the layers of matter, what you should see is what they call Atman, which is, in the Western world, we would say that's nothing but energy. So they just have a different way of looking at it. Now, if you believe the world is made up of matter and ideas, you're a dualist. You believe in dualism. If you believe there's only one reality, so if you're a materialist, you would be a monist. You would believe only in one reality. And if you're an idealist, you would also be a monist. So monism says you believe only in one reality, either matter or ideas, or non-material or immaterial. If you believe in both materialism and idealism, you're a pluralist. You at least believe there's 2 aspects to reality: light and black holes. We focus on black holes in our universe. The primary question is, what's at the other end of a black hole? If all that matter, all that energy is being sucked in, where does it go? It doesn't have to go somewhere, but what if it went right out the other end? And this is what we call the Big Bang. And there's big bangs going on all over the universe because all this matter is being sucked through. We call it a dark hole because light can't emit from it, but maybe that light goes right through and shoots out the other end. Matter and antimatter, we know matter and antimatter exist, space and nothingness or nothingness. So Plato is a dualist, people. Now, so far what you've seen, materialism, idealism, monism, dualism, you have to know this for your quiz. All of this is nuts and bolts, people. This is basic metaphysical knowledge we use in the West. Materialism, idealism, monism, pluralism, dualism, this is all basic metaphysics we use in the West. So you'll see this on your quiz. Plato, it turns out, is a dualist. He asks questions like, do you believe in the immortality of the soul? Is there a material reality and a spiritual or ideal reality? Can they coexist with one another? Do you think logical and mathematical methods of reasoning are ideal modes of arriving at the truth? Do they things have an essential nature? Should you control your passions by the use of reason? These are all questions that we ask. Plato believes in what we call ontological dualism, the reality of matter and the reality of what he calls forms or ideas. Plato believes that ideals are more real than matter, but matter is certainly real. Why? Matter is obviously always becoming. It's degrading. It's passing away, but its reality is easy to see. For Plato, ideas are characterized by permanence. For him, the ideas never change. They exist forever in the same form. Matter degrades, and therefore this is reality that's always becoming. It's going from a more perfect form to a less perfect form. Everybody have that? And Plato is going to call this permanence the land of forms. Now, he never proves this, and we're just going to go ahead and expose you to it. But he never tells you where to find the land of forms. Plato believes that there's 2 parts to reality. He's a dualist. One is the land of forms, or ideas, and the other is the land of matter. Ideas are permanent, and matter is degrading, or what we call becoming. It's always moving downhill. Everybody with me? Plato says that the forms, let's do it this way. Somewhere in the land of forms, there's something called tableness. There's a perfect table. But it's not like an object that we see. From this perfect idea of table, we get tables like this, we get end tables, we get coffee tables, we get all these different kinds of tables. And they all have their origin in what we call tableness. For Plato, therefore, essence precedes existence. Out of the ideas or the forms, we get instances, you'll see this on your quiz, that's why I'm using this language, instances of the form. They'll be imperfect, they'll always be degrading, but they get their existence from the essence or the ideal, the perfect form. Everybody follow that? So there'd be a perfect, in the land of forms, there'd be a perfect human. And from that we get examples of or instances of humans. We're all degrading. We're going downhill. You're going a lot slower than I am, but you're all degrading. Eventually everything that's in the material world degrades. Cars, must be some carness somewhere up in the land of forms. So everything in the land of forms is a perfect world, never degrades. And from this land of the forms, matter is created. It finds its essence in the forms, and it comes into existence, and it's always in a degrading format. Everybody follow that? Let's take a minute and think about that. What's wrong? Go ahead.
What if ideas are lost?
What if what?
What if ideas are like lost? Like nobody, they're not in the form.
In Plato's world, that can't happen. It's a valid question. In Plato's world, that doesn't happen. He never tells you where the land of forms is. He's an idealist, don't forget. Metaphysics, what's really real is, he'll call this the soul, okay? And when you pop into the world, I gave you a quick example on Tuesday, Socrates believes we're born with innate ideas. So he takes a slave boy who doesn't know anything about geometry, and he shows him that he really knows how to double the size of a square. Well, he leads him down the primrose path. He believes those ideas are always innate us, so they can't disappear. He believes they're there forever. They're permanent. And the material things are not permanent. They're going to degrade over time. We don't have to agree with them, but he believes in a land of forms, everything is permanent and pure, and it can't go anywhere. Its existence is guaranteed in a perfect state. Okay? Yeah. I don't agree with them, but okay. Well, then this raises a question. If out of the perfect you get the imperfect, how does that happen? If I have a corn seed, what can you get out of a corn seed? Corn. Can I get an apple out of it? Can I get a cherry out of it? Can I get a bean out of it or a pea? Every seed reproduces after its own kind. If I have a perfect, the form, how do you get an imperfect out of the perfect? If the imperfect has its origin or essence in the perfect, how do you get imperfect out of a perfect? By definition, the perfect is not imperfect. How do you get an imperfect, a world of deteriorating materialism, out of something that's perfect? And of course, the cheap answer is, well, you just make it that way. But if an imperfect comes out of the perfect, then the perfect must have some sense of imperfection. You